This is the Mountain and Prairie Podcast. I'm Ed Robertson. My guest today is Logan Maxwell-Alexander. Logan is an Ojai, California-based contemporary artist with modern visions of the American West. Logan's no stranger to longtime Mountain and Prairie listeners. He first joined me for a podcast conversation back in 2019, and he made another appearance in 2022 alongside several other renowned Western artists in an episode recorded live at Maxwell-Alexander Gallery's 10-year anniversary exhibition. In this episode, I reconnected with Logan at his Ojai studio, and we caught up on a long list of fascinating topics, including his upcoming exhibition at the Gerald Peters Gallery in New York City titled Flowers Will Grow. Since our first podcast conversation, Logan's artistic career has continued to skyrocket, and his work has earned the acclaim of a growing number of collectors, critics, and journalists. Most recently, his painting titled Time and Space won Best in Show at the Autry's Masters of the American West show. He's also been featured in all corners of the Western art world, including a recent spread in Western art and architecture and collaborations with well-known brands such as Stetson and Pendleton. But perhaps most impressively, he's accomplished all of this success while being a deeply committed husband and father of 2 young children. As you'll hear in this conversation, Logan works extremely hard and is fully committed to exploring new realms of his artistic interests. But he brings balance and calmness to what could easily become an all-consuming obsession. I caught Logan just as he was wrapping up all of the final details for his upcoming show, and we had a fun discussion about a wide range of topics, including the intensity of preparing for an art show, accepting the judgment that comes with showing art, his practice of constant doodling, how living in Ojai has changed his approach, the importance of self-talk, Georgia O'Keeffe, the idea that perfection is boring, the need for action, and much more. Check out the episode notes for a full list of topics discussed and links to everything. And if you happen to be in New York, the Flowers Will Grow exhibition will open with a reception with Logan on Thursday evening, April 18th, 2024, and will be on display through May 23rd. There's a link in the episode notes with all that information. A huge thanks to Logan for letting me barge into his studio during such a busy time, and a huge thanks to you for listening. Hope you enjoy. All right, Logan. So what the hell is going on in the studio? What did I walk into here?
I know. I think you said Hampton Sides referred to where I'm at right now as the pain cave.
Yes.
I think that was his term.
Yeah.
I definitely feel that. But that's what you walked into. I basically, when I come here in the morning, I get up, in the preparation for this show, this solo show that I have coming up. I've been getting up at like 4 a.m.
Wow.
And I just walk out here with coffee and I just have blinders on. So there's piles of things that I should be organizing or cleaning or throwing away. And I just ignore it and go work. I cleaned up a little bit for you, but my desk, with my computer on it, probably had like 10 bottles of water and 8 mugs, that I had coffee in at one point. And it's just like singular focus. It's like I don't even see the piles of stuff until someone else comes to visit. I go, God, I'm crazy.
Well, and I want to compare that to kind of your normal process, but can you talk a bit about the show coming up? Because it sounds like it's going to be really, really cool, and it's not your first time in New York, if I'm right on that.
Yeah, so this is the second solo show I've had in New York, and so there was a couple seasons ago. The spring season was just crazy with rain, and then obviously, the earth came to life. So there's so much growing, so many flowers, wildflowers and stuff growing around, and I love painting hollyhocks. And in my town here where I live, they grow, all over the place, just street corners or, people's property. And so I got this idea for a show to be a little bit more focused and have a theme to it. So the idea of flowers, there was going to be this abundance of flowers. So I thought, God, that'd be kind of cool to do a solo show, a group of paintings just with the theme of flowers, and kind of like loosely themed, where I could, sometimes it's just going to be a painting of a flower. Sometimes it's going to be a painting with flowers in it as a secondary sort of thing. And so I approached the gallery in New York about that, and they were all for it.
So can you talk a bit about that gallery? Because obviously you were on, I was looking back at when you came on, and it was a long time ago.
Yeah.
Like you hadn't even moved up here at that point.
That's right,
I don't think. And then y'all were nice enough to invite me to your 10-year anniversary, and then Bo came on the podcast. And so I think people who've been listening for a while understand, kind of what you do and then what you and Bo have created. And it's amazingly cool. But why work with a gallery outside of Maxwell-Alexander? Because I remember I saw some of your work at this particular gallery in Santa Fe, at their Santa Fe gallery years ago when I was down there, and you told me to go get those good tacos at that place.
Yeah, El Parasol.
Yeah, I love that
if
place.
You pass through Santa Fe, go hit up El Parasol.
So good. Yeah, I fully endorse them. But why, because y'all have created this amazing community with Maxwell-Alexander, why would you do this with this other gallery?
Yeah, so I'm trying to think of the timeline, but I was showing with Gerald Peters' gallery in Santa Fe before we even started the gallery. So it's kind of a long-standing relationship.
Nice.
And, I think it's pretty unique and valuable to have an outlet in New York for the type of work that I do. So it just makes a lot of sense for me. It's a different, to see my work in a different context is important to me. So it's not just seen in the West. Like if you go to Santa Fe and you see my paintings, it might be kind of like, well, yeah, of course, that's the type of art that's shown in a gallery in Santa Fe. But they might seem a little out of place in New York, but I like that. It's a good thing. You go to like the Smithsonian in Washington, D.C., and there's paintings of the West in the Smithsonian. And like I feel like when you see them there, like I said, it's a different context. So they're just viewed differently. And it's not like, I don't feel like I do tourist art, but like if you go to Santa Fe and see my paintings, like I said, they feel like they're very much in that place. So I like the idea. To me, it's important. New York is really important. It's like the Mecca for the art world.
Yes.
And so I think I've always wanted to have my work be shown in New York.
I got a little bit of a taste of that with, I talked to so many authors and the publishing world, and it's all based, it's kind of the epicenter is New York City. And there's a similar thing of where it can be a bit of a challenge sometimes to get New York to pay attention to, in quotes, Western stuff in the literary world. And there's been some book promotion stuff that I've helped people with, and trying to get like the New York Times to pay attention to Western stuff can be, but when you do, it's pretty cool. And so when you did your first show there back in 18, is that right?
2018.
Like, were you nervous? Were you nervous in the lead up to that? Like, how's this gonna fit?
Yeah, I was nervous. I was excited. I had no clue what was going to happen with it, because it's like, just kind of oddball to not, there have been other artists that paint the West that have shown out in New York, but it's been a while since anybody's done that. So yeah, I had no idea what to expect, but the show, it was really well received. Actually, all the paintings sold on the opening night.
Did they really?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
So it was cool. It was the gallery was just crowded full of people, and a bunch of people flew out for the show.
Really?
Yeah. Like, collectors that had already had some of my paintings, and friends and family. It was a lot of fun.
Well, that was the thing that struck me at the 10-year anniversary. Obviously all the artists are cool as shit, just really, really good folks across the board. But what struck me was that it's like you and Bo built this community. It's kind of a 360 community, because even all the collectors that I talked to were just unbelievably cool and interesting. And I've actually stayed in touch with a few of them, via social media or whatever after the fact. So I think that, and that was 6 years ago now in New York. And so I would imagine that that community has only strengthened since then.
For sure. Yeah. Cool. It's grown quite a bit. And it's like these shows have a big impact too. I've found that, in my world, that's kind of a lot to explain, but there's this circuit of museum exhibitions where living artists are invited to show at these annual shows at these museums. And so they're kind of a big deal in my world, where there'll be like 70 artists in a show. Oh, wow. and you're invited to send, like 3 paintings to be exhibited in the show.
Is that like the Briscoe Museum kind
exactly,
of thing?
Briscoe, or like the Prix de West at the National Cowboy Museum, or Masters of the American West at the Autry Museum.
Yep.
Things like that. But, and they're great, but I've found that for me personally, I have a really like a much stronger impact when I have a solo show at a gallery, and there's these waves and sort of, I just feel like there's a reach that's a lot deeper when I have a group of paintings versus like maybe 1 or 2 or 3 paintings in a show at a museum. If I could show 10 or 15 paintings together, it's just a much clearer message or vision or statement, I guess. And so I think that they have a stronger impact. So yeah, I mean, even I'm still feeling people still talk to me about that show in New York.
Really?
You know, even like just recently. So I feel it, you know, for years to come after those shows.
This is probably not the right moment to be asking you this question, given that, you know, it's the peak chaos of going up the show. But do you feel like these shows, whether it's solo shows or these big events, like I think about the only frame of reference I have is like training for a hard race. And like, I take pride personally in if you saw the results, you would think it's a disaster. But when I'm doing these long runs, like once a year, I'll have a long run and there's this lead up to it and I do it and then I can relax. And then when you look back at the kind of the history, it's like this kind of peak of training hard, doing something I'm proud of. And then, but it provides this almost like a structure to this life, you know, this years long commitment to running. And I feel like with these shows, like, the intensity, like for this one with, you know, you're focusing on flowers, the intensity of the lead up, when you look back at your kind of career, do those things, are they kind of like marking points for how your artwork has evolved? Does that make any sense?
Yeah, definitely.
Because it's like a pressure cooker and it forces you.
Yeah, it's great. Like people get annoyed with deadlines. Yeah. And they are annoying, but it's this necessary evil that they, you know, otherwise it's like you just have all this time and you'll paint and things can kind of be, I feel like, less cohesive sometimes if you're just kind of flailing and working, where if you have this thing that's zeroing you in, like, hey, you got to get everything done by this time, and like a self-inflicted theme or limitation, like flowers. Constraints, exactly. Yeah. Like it's forcing me to exercise my brain and stretch myself to think of how many different ways can I paint something interesting with this particular theme in mind in the background, you know? So, but yeah, I look back at all the shows I've had and they feel like it's really interesting to see these bodies of work that I've done and, you know, how I've grown over time or maybe even stagnated over time. There's times where I look back 10 years ago and I'm like, God, that was an interesting direction. Why didn't I continue off in that way? Yeah. You know, how did I get kind of stuck off in this sort of thing that I'm doing? So yeah, they're markers of time and an effort that I went through, you know.
When you think back to that 2018 show, just like as a marker, because it's, you know, kind of going back to the same place. Like sometimes I feel like you don't think about stuff like this, you're not like obsessed with the details. You're just doing your work. But like how has your art changed since that time, if at all? Or you may not even pay attention to that.
Yeah, it's hard for me to even like verbalize what's different. You know, I'd have to like maybe compare the paintings side by side. But, you know, I'm thinking, you know, with this show in particular was fun because having that constraint of the theme, it forced me to do things that I may not have done before. You know, like you can't paint the same thing over and over. I guess you could, but it's boring for me to do the same thing over and over. And I like the challenge of trying to do different things. So, you know, there are some paintings where I just even laid down the paint in a way where I normally wouldn't have, you know, in a really like rough or kind of sloppy way, and then kind of rein it in from there. And other paintings I started off real methodically and with a drawing, and then built up the paint slowly and everything in between, you know. So it's been this show has been a lot of fun for me. I kind of feel like I'm going to do more stuff like this, where I give myself these constraints and limitations, you know, because it's like a pressure cooker. It forces me to like, you know, push outside of it and come up with something.
In my, like, whenever I have different constraints, in the moment, I'm always kind of mad about it, or like, man, if I didn't have to do this, then I could be doing all this other stuff. Like like right now, I'm obsessed with the jujitsu stuff. Yeah. Like if I wasn't doing jujitsu, I would go do this other thing, but I wouldn't. Like I found that I never do. Like the constraints are what make things actually happen, which I think is, I don't know. I'm kind of a weirdo when it comes to that, or maybe a discontent. I don't know. When there is no deadline, like looming deadline, and you're just like, say this time last year, or maybe you did have a big deadline then, but like, what is your day like? What is your kind of practice like when there's nothing looming? That's, you know, the kind of pressure cooker.
Yeah. I mean, there tends to always be something deadline wise out there, you know, cause I plan shows out 2-3 years in advance. So there's always something out there, but yeah, maybe it's not as dire. My deadlines aren't as extreme. So, most days lately I won't wake up at 4 a.m., unless I have to. But on a normal day, so I wouldn't wake up that early. I might wake up at like 5 or 6 so I can get up and exercise a little bit in the morning before the kids wake up. And then it's just getting the kids up and out to school. I drop them off most days. And then I come back home and have like a real workout in our gym that we built here in our garage. And then I go work for a few hours till I have to pick up my daughter at noon. And then I'm usually hanging out with them for a little bit during the day. I'll get a couple more hours in the afternoon of work. And then I check out and just hang out with the family the rest of the evening. So that's kind of like if ideal day, that's kind of,
that's the thing is like, I feel like with you and with most artists that I've talked to, I mean, I'd say maybe 75%, it's punching the clock. I mean, it's not like some burst of creativity and you go crazy, especially when you're a family man like you. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's just like grinding. I mean, not grinding, it sounds bad, but it's just constant effort.
Yeah. It's just, you're just in here working because it's not going to happen. I've found that, if I have a piece of paper in front of me and I just start doodling something, all of a sudden I'll capture this idea that turns into a painting. Every now and then I'll come up with an idea. And then I think like, God, what if I hadn't just grabbed that piece of paper and started doodling? This idea just like comes out of the air and lands on this paper.
Yep.
So if I wasn't working, if I wasn't putting in that effort, that thing wouldn't have happened. And it could be it's as simple as that, just like drawing a little thing. God, that gives me an idea. And then it develops from there, So that's really what it is. It's just getting in here and it's like a laboratory. You're just in here experimenting and working and eventually something comes out of it.
It is weird to think about that, how these ideas just appear and turn real. And then you think, well, what if that hadn't have happened?
Yeah.
I mean, like this is a dumb example, but we just got back from a week-long trip to the Grand Canyon and we didn't know what we were going to do for spring break years ago. Like a few months ago, my daughter was reading a book about Paul Bunyan. Uh-huh. And there was a thing about he drug an axe through and it created the Grand Canyon. And then I just said, we should go to the Grand Canyon for spring break. And then this whole experience happened because of that random series of events.
Yeah.
And that's, that's very similar to what or not very similar, but
no,
similar.
It is though.
That reminds me, could you, to the best you can, describe that process of drawing? Because when we were here last at the 10-year anniversary, you did this really cool demonstration where you just showed how you, for lack of a better word, doodle.
Yeah.
And you just keep doing it until one of them catches your attention. Can you kind of verbally walk us through that? Because I thought it was really interesting.
Yeah. So it's almost like a stream of consciousness, sort of way of coming up with an idea for a painting. So I'll just draw a square or a rectangle on a piece of paper, and that gives me a frame to work within. And so what that does is it allows me to start thinking about composition and how the image is going to sit on the canvas. And I'll just start with a shape or an idea. Like, let's say if it's going to be a person, I'll start drawing a face and then a hat, and then maybe the guy's on a horse or whatever. And then there's a cloud around him or whatever it is. And I just play with these different elements on the canvas, or sometimes it's just a landscape. And I just randomly start drawing without not knowing where it's going to go until I do it, and I'll do a lot of those, and a lot of them turn out like crap,
Sure.
that I'm not going to use for anything. And they just go in the trash or just stay in my sketchbook and don't go any further. But every now and then there's one that'll turn into a painting. And sometimes it's something I paint completely out of my head based on this little 2-inch sketch that I did. Other times I'll take that sketch and then I go through photographs that I have on my, that I've taken over the years on my computer. And I'll go through these files of photos and look for something that kind of matches up with my idea. Like if there's a guy in profile with light on his face, I'll look for photos that I have of people in profile with light on their face, that kind of thing. And then I just kind of piece it together. Sometimes in Photoshop, I'm awful at using computers, so it looks awful the way I patch things together. But I mean, it's the photos and these little drawings and stuff. They're just a starting off point for me, things for me to refer to, not necessarily copy, because I'm not interested in reproducing a photograph. I'm really trying to create an idea that represents more of almost like a memory of something rather than an exact replica of something that I saw.
Yeah, I thought that was a really cool demonstration you did. And I mean, I think it speaks once again to the need for action and for just doing stuff, not just sitting around thinking. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's because that that seems to be like really the foundation of everything you produce, is that those initial sketches, which is, I mean, yesterday when I was doing another interview, we just endlessly talked, the woman I was talking to, Chris Tompkins, endlessly talking about the need for action. And I think that's the common theme, no matter what you're doing.
Yeah.
Quit sitting around.
I mean, it's tempting to want to sit around and just wait for inspiration to hit. And there's great, like I've been listening to this whatever audiobook of Georgia O'Keeffe, some biography somebody wrote on her. And she would do that. Like she'd for months just sit around and gather inspiration or gather ideas. And then she would just kind of like expel all these paintings, like within like 5 days, do a few paintings.
Really?
Or something. Yeah.
I feel like that's like the legend that sends so many people astray, because there's this idea that can be done.
Yeah. There's like this like maddening, like you picture Van Gogh or somebody like just overtaken by inspiration and just like freaking out and doing 20 paintings and then collapsing in his bed or something, which, excuse me, again, maybe that is how some people work.
Van Gogh, legit nuts.
Yeah.
And he goes and cuts off his ear and sends it to his girlfriend.
But actually, Georgia O'Keeffe in this audiobook, there was something like that where she like worked for a few days every day and then just like felt exhausted, because it is such like this emotional, you know, when you're working on a painting, it doesn't seem like it would be exhausting, but it really is. You're making constant decisions.
Yeah.
You know, like thousands of decisions. Is this color too warm? Is it too cool? Is it too red? Is it too green? Whatever. Is it too light, too dark? How's this brush stroke being laid down? Should it be thick? Should it be thin? There's all these things that you're on the fly making these intuitive decisions you almost don't even realize you're making. So by the end of the day, like my mind, after a day of working, I'm shot. I could barely communicate anymore, and I'm exhausted. And so, yeah, there is some of that. But.
Well, I mean, you're putting yourself out there in a way that it's such a normal thing, like this idea of art in a gallery or art in an art museum, and people go around and look at it. But if you really stop and think about it from the perspective of the artist, like in a museum, for example, or a show, all these people going by and they're looking at this work that came out of your brain. It did not exist. Now it does. And then these random people are walking by and just kind of either verbally or just subconscious, like, yeah, that's good. Or yeah, I don't like that.
Yeah.
I mean, that would break me.
Yeah.
Just because maybe I'm too sensitive. But how have you done that? How have you managed to go through the mental part of, I don't know, being tough, because your art is so unique. Like if you walk into a gallery or online or whatever, and like when I'm scrolling through Instagram and I see your art, I instantly know it's you. But by very definition of that, it's unique, which means that some people it's not for them.
Yeah. And
they're not going to like it. Has that been a process to not let that bother you, or do you just, who gives a shit?
Yeah. It's kind of who gives a shit. I think in life I'm that way. So it's just translated and transferred onto my art as well. I think that's a good thing. If everybody likes what you're doing, you're probably doing something wrong.
I agree with that.
You know, so I don't want to do something that everybody likes necessarily. Because what does that even mean? You know, it's like, I mean, even the most popular, like Taylor Swift, for instance, in music, like, or whoever, Beyonce, like there's some of the most popular people. I'm not going to say I don't like Taylor Swift, because I don't want to hear it from her fans.
This place is going to get stormed.
But there are people out there that don't care for Taylor Swift, you know?
Yeah.
So like, but how much more likable could you get, you know? So yeah, it doesn't really bother me. You know, it's funny. I worked at, the one job I think I ever really had, this was before I kind of like really got serious into becoming like a fine artist, quote unquote fine artist. I worked at Knott's Berry Farm, a theme park, drawing caricatures, like cartoon portraits of people.
Did you really? I've never heard that.
I think I was like 19 when I did that. So what we would do is we'd sit with our back to the people that are walking by the park, you know, going from one attraction to the other. And the person that we're drawing would be sitting in front of us. So as people were walking by and I'm drawing, people would make comments, just like rude stuff, like, God doesn't look like him, you know? And then the guy sitting there's like, what? That doesn't look like me. And then it would get into his head, and then he would see it and he'd go, that doesn't look like me. And then they wouldn't buy it. So they didn't have to buy the thing. I mean, most people did, but every now and then they'd say, that doesn't look like me. Or they'd say like, oh, I'll come back and buy it later. And then they disappear. And it kind of stunk because I wasn't being paid hourly. I'd get paid on per drawing. Yeah. So there'd be times when I wouldn't even make my gas money. But anyway, what that did early on, that gave me a pretty thick skin because I was having people comment like live as I was working. And so now I feel pretty good about doing a demonstration in front of people or someone watching me paint. Like if I'm outdoors and somebody walks by and they stand there for a few minutes, it doesn't really bother me, I think
that's so important. I mean, because it's exactly what you said. If everybody liked it, that's kind of a problem. I think about like, I don't know. I just feel like what you're doing is, and what really any amazing artist does, it's great because nobody's ever seen anything like it before.
Yeah.
And by very definition, a lot of people were not going to like it. I didn't know that story about the caricatures.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah. It was kind of cool. I mean, that was kind of more, I was more interested in cartoons and animation at the time when I was doing that.
Yeah.
So I thought I might, go in that direction, but I would actually do, kind of forgetting about this, but I used to do like birthday parties, weddings, things like that. People would hire me and I'd come and sit there for a few hours and draw guests at the parties and stuff.
Really?
Yeah. So there's a bunch of caricatures out there with my signature on it.
That's really cool. That's really, some of those end up on eBay.
Yeah.
That's funny.
But, thinking about like something for everybody and not like, artists doing things that maybe not everybody likes. I look at somebody like Bob Dylan, like he's a big inspiration for me because you look at what he did early on, like the folk stuff. And then when he turned electric, started playing electric, it was like there was this uproar. And then like he started doing country albums and then he was like just all over the place. And then now more recently, he's become so kind of like off the wall, bizarre in a lot of ways. There's this album that I love that he did where he did like old Frank Sinatra songs and and remakes of songs of that era. And I love it because he did it in his own unique way. Yeah. So I keep thinking about that. And when I go through a museum, I do the same thing that people do to my art. I go, I like that, or I don't like that. I pass judgment like that as I'm walking around. So I'm doing the same thing. So it's like, I'm not going to really complain about something or get caught up in something that is just, it's a natural human reaction.
Yeah, it is. So. It definitely is. Yeah. A Bob Dylan song came on like Apple Music, whatever, just randomly in our house the other day. And my daughters are in this music class at school. And the music teacher seems like a bit of a tyrant and really all over them and about doing this and that. And I said, listen to this guy's voice. I said, do you think that music teacher would, if you came in singing like that, the music teacher would give you an A? Absolutely not. You'd probably fail out. But the reason that Bob Dylan is great is because he's doing his own thing. He's an individual. And I feel like everything, like with schools and probably in art classes and in a lot of ways, they're trying, the theme can be uniform, make everybody perfect.
Yeah.
And I feel like perfect is boring.
Yeah. It's like you look at the American Idol TV show, like format, it's like the best, quote unquote, best singer will usually win, but then like they just fall off the face of the earth. It's because like we don't necessarily want the best singer. We want somebody who is unique and brings something out in us. Like Bob Dylan all day would bring something out emotionally in me over the perfect on pitch singer,
Well, yeah. And I think AI will make that even more intense because things will just be, whether it's art or writing, that the standard perfect stuff will be able to be produced with the push of a button. And so it's going to be the artist who are willing to do stuff in a weird way. I think it'll make it even more important.
Yeah.
I hope.
Yeah. I think people will get more weird.
Yeah,
for sure.
I hope so. Speaking of artists, who else do you admire? Like it could be painters, musicians, authors. Like, are there other people that, like when you look around your studio here, there's a lot of inspiration, whether it's books and, I imagine you listen to music and other art, and like, who do you admire?
Yeah. I go through phases, I feel like, with artists that I'm looking at. Generally I'm looking at artists, past historic artists that are deceased now. But like for instance, my friend Glenn Dean, who's a great artist. So he's somebody I'm inspired by and look at, but he told me about this book that Norman Rockwell did of basically wrote his autobiography of his life, his life story. And so I read that book and it kind of set me off in this crazy direction where I was like, I started becoming obsessed with Norman Rockwell. And like, that's not necessarily somebody I'd be thinking about, but but just listening to his story and everything he went through and his process, even, it really got me inspired. So there's one painting in my show, actually this one over here with the flowers, called A Day in the Life, with the flowers. They all have flowers. This guy standing next to the flowers. It kind of got me. I was like, man, I want to try his process. So I did a really detailed drawing on the canvas. And then I did a slow like underpainting and then painted on top of that. So there's like multiple layers. It took forever. That painting took like about a year.
Did it really?
Yeah. From start to finish.
What is that, like 3 by 1.5 or something like that?
Something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Not a very big painting, but it just took me forever to work on, and I made changes. And so anyway, that's just one example of like, I'll kind of go off on a weird jag and get obsessed with an artist. So right now I've been looking at Georgia O'Keeffe a lot. Coincidentally, it's not because she painted flowers, but I've been looking at her a lot and listening to books on, audiobooks on her, and finding whatever I can on YouTube about her, and
really
listening to her talk, and just like I think I'm just attracted to these unique visions. Like, she was such a unique person, just her as a person. Like, she grew up or came up in a time when like you didn't wear a simple black dress with your hair pulled back. It was like, fancy dresses and with like a pompadour and, fancy curls and stuff. And she was just stood out like a sore thumb in life, period, So, I don't know. I get inspired by all kinds of people for different reasons,
Was Georgia O'Keeffe like a tortured soul kind of person, or was she pretty level-headed, like easygoing? I mean, when you were talking, I don't know anything about her, but you were talking about how she would crank out, go on these binges of work. I mean, was she overall kind of a content person, or?
I feel like she was pretty even keel,
really,
from what I gather anyway. I think there was some struggle. She had an older husband, this guy named Alfred Stieglitz,
okay,
who was pretty instrumental in modernism being introduced to America.
Oh, wow.
And I think people wouldn't argue that he was really instrumental in her success. He was a really big promoter of her, believed in her work, actually started showing her work in his gallery that he had before they were, together as a couple.
Yeah.
So he really believed in her work. But I think there were some struggles there where like she had a lot of wanderlust. She wanted to travel, like go to the Southwest. And he was really he grew up in New York, and they had a summer house at Lake George in New York. And so that was his world, New York City and Lake George, where she wanted to get out and be alone. And so I think there was a little bit of struggle there. And so she ended up going out to New Mexico and spending a lot of time away from him in the summers.
Okay.
But I think generally she just was very serious about her work, and once she decided she wasn't going to have kids, she would sort of form her days to just make art the focus and have everything else fade away.
Since we last talked, it's crazy how time has gone by. I mean, like pandemic and all that shit. But you're now up here in Ojai, which is, we were talking before we started recording, man. I mean, this place is awesome. I love it. How has that affected just life in general? I mean, could be your work, could be, but I feel like you've really got a pretty solid base camp here for your family and like good schools, the whole deal. Like how is it? How are things compared to when we last talked, when you were not in Ojai?
I just like, I don't want to talk too highly about Ojai because I want people to stay away. But
yeah, this place actually is mine. Yeah, it's terrible.
But it is going through a weird transition. Like I'm from LA, so I can't talk too much shit, but I talk shit about the LA people that are moving here because it's like, I don't want this place to change. And I feel like a lot of people are moving here and they love it for a reason, but then they want to change it and make it fancy and make it like Venice or something. Yeah. I mean, it's just the pace of life, I think, has had a huge effect on me. Everything's 10 minutes away versus being in LA. If you have to drive somewhere, you got to plan your whole day around traffic and getting somewhere. Cause
it's really crazy. And you had told me that, and I'd heard that a million times, but it's beyond suffocating.
Yeah.
It's really, I don't understand. I couldn't live there because of that. And the surfing and the weather is awesome, but it's crazy.
Yeah. And I grew up down there. So I grew up in the San Fernando Valley.
Oh, okay.
And so it was just life to me. I thought I'd always live there. And my wife and I we'd come up to Ojai and we'd go up to Montana or wherever, and like started realizing that we should shift our lives so that we're not going away for a weekend to get away from the city. We should be living where we keep going away to. And then if we want to come to the city, just come down for a day or two, get a fix if we need it. But I mean, I find that I don't even want a fix anymore. Like I was down in LA and Pasadena here in the last couple days, and I just couldn't get back up here fast enough, you know. But yeah, I mean, it's just such a different lifestyle. I have my studio on my property here. We built the studio, and you know, we've got sheep, we've got chickens, we've got a little bit of land, so we can just like roam around. And it's just, you know, I went out to grab something from our garage the other day in our backyard, and there's a deer that runs away. I didn't even notice it there, and they're eating acorns and jets off. So just stuff like that, you know, it's just such a different life.
How are I think we're kind of wired similarly in our introverted ways, but do the interesting people around here affect you one way or the other? I mean, I would imagine it seems like there's a really eclectic group of, you know, whether like we were talking before we started recording, I was with Rick Ridgway, the mountaineer guy yesterday, checking out all these crazy turtles, this turtle conservancy. And then like, you'll see a farmer walking down the road, but it seems like it's just kind of a interesting group of people, which could go both ways, I guess. Yeah.
It's interesting because I think there's about 8,000 people in Ojai.
Oh, okay.
So there's a lot of variety, you know, in this pretty small town.
Yeah.
Like I was down the street when the last election cycle was happening. There's this cul-de-sac and these neighbors are next to each other. There's this huge Trump sign, and then this huge like Biden and peace and love, everybody's welcome and all this stuff. And like they're right there next to each other. I mean, they know that they're putting up these huge signs right next to each other. And I don't know if they get along or not. I don't know the people, but there's a lot of that. There's just that and then everything in between, you know.
That's good. And I mean, I think that's important.
Yeah, no, it gives you like a real dose of life. You're not just in this like echo chamber, you know. So it's the reality of people, and there's all walks of life here, like anywhere really, I guess. I mean, but I don't know. I pretty much I keep to myself mostly.
Yeah.
So it's weird. There's access to a lot of interesting people here, and I have some artist friends and stuff. There's a guy named John Nava who I became friends with before we moved here. And he's great. He lives on the other side of the valley here, but you know, even him, I rarely see. We're buddies, but I'll see him like a couple times a year or something, you know, if that. So like I said, I want to, my family's pretty time consuming in the best way possible. So I want to be around them, and I just want to be working, and I don't have a whole lot of free time.
No, I think we were recently trying to schedule a call, and both of us, I think it took us quite a while because of family obligations.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's exactly how I am. I mean, family is it, and other family and my work stuff. And otherwise, I mean, I without like the influence of my wife, I could very easily, like outside of podcast stuff, not talk to anybody for months on end.
Yeah. Oh God, I have this like weird fantasy of like, because I have this place out in the middle of nowhere in Arizona.
Oh, nice.
It's at the base of the Vermilion Cliffs.
Okay. Yeah.
God, I think I could so easily just disappear and live there and be, I don't know. I think I could be pretty happy.
Yeah.
Who knows the reality of being that isolated for any long period of time, but again, it's the fantasy of it.
You might not ever know that you're going crazy because you'd be enjoying it. But then like, as you would go and interact with the real world, everybody'd be like, that guy's nuts.
Yeah, I think so, actually, because every time I come back from there and then I get into the real world, I feel like my eyes are like, you know, twice the size, and I'm just like, what are all these people? What's everyone doing, and the traffic? And so, yeah, I think it would affect me.
I treat community and the need to build community. I read that book Tribe by Sebastian Junger, and it just changed my whole perspective about how humans need community. And I treat it like exercise. Like when I have to go to my daughter's school and have bullshit small talk with some other dad about his lawn mowing regimen.
Yeah.
I just do. I'm like, this is a mandatory part of living in a community.
Yeah.
And that sounds awful in some ways, but I mean, otherwise I could just be solo and I'd probably lose my mind, and my daughters would suffer.
Yeah. Isn't there's some like statistic where like if you talk to people like the checkout person at the market, like your life expectancy is increased by a number of years.
I think you're right. I've heard that.
Yeah. So there is something that can, and that is something that I found here. Like in LA, you don't ever talk to people. Mm-mm. You just like, it's head down, you pay for your food and you go. But like here just naturally, I think it's because it's a smaller place. So it's like, I don't know, people are more approachable. I don't know what it is, but I know my butcher. I know my butcher's name. They know me. They know my kids' names. I mean, I know the checkout people at the market, and it's just like you just talk to random people.
That's what it's all about, man.
Yeah.
I mean, it's so important. Speaking of your place in Arizona, how often do you go out? Like, because I know sometimes you make trips down that way for painting, whether it's solo or with other artists. Like, how often do you do that now? Because pandemic screwed everything up. And then how important is that to you as an artist? Like you could probably end up, there's enough to do or you could never leave here. But is that kind of like an injection of inspiration and energy to
Definitely.
go do that?
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of where I sort of like the fact that I can get out there, gather all this inspiration, and then come back here and try to make sense of it. And I think that separation, at least this is what I tell myself. I feel like the separation is actually a good thing because it allows me to have more of maybe like a singular, clear vision instead of being too inspired or influenced by the landscape.
I see.
You know, directly being out there or the people or even other artists. Like, because I'll look at something when I'm out and I'm like, God, that looks like a Maynard Dixon cliff or something, or his clouds or whatever it is. And so having that separation from the place, I feel like is a good thing. But yeah, like I was just recently in Taos, I don't know, maybe a month ago. And I went out for a short trip just purely to gather inspiration and reference. You know, I met up with some people, we did some photo shoots and I just kind of wander and come up with new ideas. Something will just strike me and I'll come up with an idea and bring it back here and try to make sense of it. So, I mean, I bought that house out in Arizona before we had kids. Oh, okay. And my thought was like, oh God, I'll be out there like for a few months at a time and just like run out there whenever I want. And then the reality of having kids is a whole other thing. And not wanting to be away from them for that long.
Sure.
Or that often. So lately, I mean, yeah, since the pandemic, I feel like that kind of did screw up my travel and I'm just sort of getting back to it. I feel like getting back in the swing of things. But I mean, ideally try to take like, 3-4 good trips a year.
Nice.
And like I said, I'm just working back into that. I feel like now.
In a way, the kids are, you talk about the artistic constraints. Like I'm going to do this show with flowers, but the kids in a way are a very big constraint because it forces you to, at least for me with my work, I feel like I'm much more efficient, even though things would be quote easier without the family obligations. It makes everything much better.
Yeah. Just you realize that you have a limited amount of time to get things done.
Yeah.
And you just focus in, you don't waste time.
Focus is the secret to life.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah. It's tricky. Focus and like self-talk you can screw yourself up if that inside voice from like anything, like it's particularly like exercise for me or like diet. If, God, I've been eating so good lately. What's one donut going to do, or like, God, it's 4 a.m. Do I really want to get up and go walk on the treadmill for a half hour? I just kind of been so good lately, but like that evil inside voice,
rationalization.
Yeah. It's so easy to go like, but you're supposed to get a lot of sleep and I don't know, I don't want to come down with a cold or, you could just talk yourself out of it. But like, I think that like it's focus, but it's also fighting against that nasty inside voice that tells you that you don't need to work or you don't need to get up and exercise or whatever it is, I think those two things for me, just ignoring that and almost like punishing myself where like, if my inside voice is saying, don't do it, I do it twice as hard just to punish myself,
Do you follow Jocko Willink, the Navy SEAL
I do,
guy? Yeah. That's his whole thing.
Oh yeah.
It's just the idea of discipline and don't, if you're going to get it, you get up when the alarm goes off.
Yeah. There's just no question. You just get up.
Easier said than done, but he's been very helpful.
For sure. Yeah. It's just like, for me, I personally like fall off the wagon so hard. So I have to exercise every day or I just fall off. If I go a few days, it's just like, I know some people say you're not supposed to exercise every day, but if I don't do it every day, I could so easily break that habit.
Same.
So that's kind of how and with art even too, like I'll go through periods where I do get lazy and I might not be working every day. And then it's like, I almost don't want to break back into painting. Cause I'm like, how do I even do this? Once I'm in the mode, it kind of comes easily and I can just flow, and ideas flow when I'm working a lot easier. If I take a break from it, it's really hard to get back into it.
That's exactly how I am. I mean, like this silly jujitsu thing. Mm-hmm. I haven't been because my wife was traveling, then I was sick for a week.
Yeah.
And now I'm, traveling and I'm already coming up excuses why I shouldn't go on Friday morning.
Right.
Like I need to stretch a little more. I need to do this and that.
Yeah.
And what I need to do is get in there and get my ass kicked.
Yeah. That's all it is.
This may be a question for Bo, but can you talk about the new gallery?
Yeah. I mean, there's not a whole lot to talk about because we've been in this like a permit phase where we're just trying to get the city to say, okay, all we're trying to do is put up drywall and a little bit of plumbing, but it's been tricky getting the city to say, yeah, do that.
And to what city?
Pasadena.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where we're at. We have this building that we bought, and the concrete floors are all torn up and stuff for inspections and permits and whatever, all kinds of stuff that we're dealing with. So that's kind of where it's at right now. Once everything's given the green light, it's going to be really quick to get the thing up and running. So we're hoping, I think we're looking at like late summer opening.
Okay, nice.
But we were supposed to be open in January, and we're recording this early April. So we're definitely behind what we thought where we would be.
What prompted that move? Because I know y'all had such a great run in downtown.
Yeah, I think we'd been wanting to buy a building for a while. We were sick of paying rent, and downtown was good, or at least where we were. So we rented the space downtown before COVID, and then once COVID hit. And so the neighborhood was supposed to be going in a great direction. And then once COVID hit, it just went the other way. And, so there's just it wasn't the most pleasant place to visit. And so, there's these, pretty wealthy people rolling up to this rough neighborhood, trying to figure out where they're going to park their car and all that stuff. And it was feeling kind of rough. And like I said, we wanted to be paying towards a mortgage instead of someone else's rent. Yeah, so Pasadena just seemed like a good option. This building popped up, and it was within our price range, and it just made sense. Pasadena there's a lot of cool history in Pasadena.
I've never been there.
Oh, okay, yeah. Well, you'll have to come out once we get the gallery going here. But there's a lot of people that appreciate art in that town.
Yeah,
there's a big arts and crafts movement that was kind of based partially in that area, and there's just an appreciation for art in the area. So people, it's in the backyard of people that are going to be into the type of things that we're showing.
Well, the old spot was awesome, and so I can't wait. I can only imagine how cool this one will be.
Yeah.
A few more questions for you, and then I'm going to let you get back to packing up all this stuff. I don't envy you. I'm excited for you, but I don't envy the moment you're in right now.
I know. Yeah, it's rough. I did finish all the paintings, like as of, where are we? So as of 2 days ago, I had to have all the paintings done, so that they would be able to dry in time and I could get them framed up and shipped out in time.
Yeah.
And the gallery's going to release a preview of the show here pretty soon. So it was like, I'm in a little bit of a relief mode today, but then the rest of the week into next week is going to be like framing and packing and shipping. And
there's a lot. I mean, I assume that there was a lot that went into it, but when you actually see it at this moment, like there's a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm always asking about books. You're always either reading or listening, and you got an awesome shelf over there full of books. We already mentioned George O'Keeffe, but any books that you've been reading or anything come to mind that you would recommend?
God, what have I been looking at lately? Yeah, it's mostly been art focused lately. Even just, it's funny. I usually get art books and I don't read them. I just look at the pictures.
Yeah.
So I've been kind of forcing myself to go through and read some of these books. And it's, some of it's interesting. Some of it, like the art historian perspective, I sometimes have a little bit of a beef with because I'm seeing these artists as artists from the artist's perspective. And so they'll say things about like why they did something or like, technical things in the paintings. And I'll just think like, that's not why they did that. They did it. Sometimes it's like the artist painted that thing because they just felt like painting that thing. It had nothing to do with the political landscape at the time or whatever, So I've been doing a lot of that. I mean, I feel like David McCullough is always somebody I keep returning to. I read his books quite a bit.
How cool that he's Tim Lawson's father-in-law.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. That's pretty crazy.
Very crazy.
Yeah.
I still need to get Tim on the pod. He was nice enough to invite me up to his place in Wyoming.
Oh, yeah.
And then I jacked my shoulder and was out of it for quite a while.
Oh, that's right.
But I want to get up there because he's an awesome guy.
Yeah, I'd love to hear a podcast with him.
He's got like a cow skeleton in his studio.
Does he?
Yeah.
Yeah, that guy's nuts. He's got nuts in the best way possible. He's got he's just so good. And so he's just so committed to what he does, and he'll work on a painting for months and months and months, and he's just like, he's doubting himself every step along the way.
Really?
And you just look at what he's doing, and I'm like, God, are you crazy? This is like amazing what you're working on, and but he's just so self-critical. He's just, you know, I get it. I feel the same way. I mean, I'm always aiming for the stars. You look at this great historic art that's been created in the past. And so if you're holding yourself up to those standards, you know, there's a lot to aim for.
Oh yeah. Well, and for people who aren't familiar, they could go back and listen to that live episode from the Maxwell-Alexander Gallery, but he did the White House Christmas card one year.
That's right.
Yeah. I mean, he's gotten probably as much confirmation from, you know, the general public that you're really good at what you do. And so it's interesting to hear that he's still self-critical and worried.
I think though, amongst the greatest artists in history, that's a really common theme.
It'd be very weird if he was like, yeah, this is pretty awesome.
Yeah.
You know, like the world's going to love this.
Right. Yeah. Most artists I know that are really good can almost barely stand to look at their own work, you know?
Wow.
Yeah. Cause you know, I think what happens is you see the artist that created the thing, you see all the struggle that went into it, where someone else just sees the finished product and, oh, that's pretty or whatever it is. But, you know, like when I look at one of my paintings, I just see, oh God, I remember I really struggled on that one part. And does that look weird? Did I really resolve that or not? Or like, it was just unpleasant maybe sometimes just working on that particular thing. And so it's like, I almost think about that with musicians. Like, can they, like Bob Dylan can't listen to Bob Dylan, you know, in the same way that you or I could listen to Bob Dylan.
Yeah.
You know,
because there's just these endless stories in his mind about that part. I rewrote that lyric 10 times, or I didn't like the way that sounded. And I'm sure there are parts that he still doesn't like.
Yeah.
And it's like fingernails on a chalkboard. I think about that with writers a lot. You know, like a massive 100,000 word book. I mean, I'm sure there's just probably thousands of words that if they went through, they're like, I wouldn't do that the same this time.
Yeah. And they can't just like shut off and read their book the way, you know, some person off the street could read one of the books, because they're just self-analyzing the whole time. Well,
and in writing, at least you can hire, you know, a third-party editor helps with that process. Whereas in what you do, there's nobody, you can't hire somebody to come in and say, I think you should move this over. It would make more sense. So you're completely solo.
Totally. Cause it's all so personal, all these decisions. Like some of the weird stuff I do in my paintings, I kind of have stopped showing my paintings to friends and say like, hey, what do you think about this? Cause what they think about it is based off their, you know, their artistic practice and what they might do. But the weird thing I'm doing that might seem weird to somebody else is it's purposely done. So I just have to trust my own judgment. Like, is this thing complete? Is it good? Is it or not? You know, and that's just kind of as far as it goes for me.
That's a good spot to be in, but I know it's tough. I can only imagine how it's tough. Cause I mean, it is like you're out there solo cranking these. I mean, you've got a great team and a great partnership with your brother and all, but at the end of the day, man, it's you, which is cool and scary.
Yeah. And I think you have to, personally, I just pretend like I'm like acting that it's okay and that I'm not freaked out by it.
Act as if.
Yeah. Just like, I'm not like, well, if I have to go talk in front of people, that's why the advice I give people is just pretend like you're not, just act like you're the type of person that could talk in front of a group of people. It generally works.
I heard that the Conan O'Brien, he's a silly guy, but he's very smart. And I heard a serious interview with him, and he said his secret has been, somebody said, act as if. And he said, you know, he's sitting there, you know, get to interview a president, you know, President Obama or whatever. And he's like, I'm just a clown. And I'm hanging out with Obama. What's that all about? And he said he just has to act as if he's the type of person that can do that.
Yeah.
And I mean, not that I'm in your sphere or Conan O'Brien's sphere, but whenever I come face to face with all these people I've admired, that's what I have to tell myself. Yeah. Because I mean, that's kind of the only way. It'd be just very strange if you're the type of person that's like, yeah, I'm a badass.
Right. Yeah. I mean, otherwise you just get freaked out. So you just have to act and pretend like it's supposed to be what's happening is supposed to be, you know?
Well, man, I'm very glad. Thank you for making time. I'm glad this worked out to do this in person. I'm excited for the show. I'm glad to see your studio, and I appreciate the support, friendship, all of it. You're the man.
Likewise, man. Yeah, I appreciate it. Thanks for coming out.
Hey, it's Ed again. Thanks so much for listening to the podcast. I know your time is valuable, so it means the world that you spend it listening. If you want to support the podcast and help it to continue to spread and grow, there are a few ways you can help. Number one, pass it along to a friend or share it on social media. Word of mouth recommendations are the most powerful way for ideas to spread, so I'd love it if you could share the podcast with a few pals who might enjoy it. Number 2, you can go to Apple Podcasts and give it a 5-star review. Good reviews encourage the Apple overlords to suggest the podcast to others. So there's a link in the notes if you'd be so kind as to give it 5 stars. Number 3, you can support the podcast financially via Patreon, and there are exclusive benefits for those who do, including a monthly behind-the-scenes newsletter, Mountain and Prairie stickers, live and recorded video chats with podcast guests, and much more. Number 4, I've also got 2 emails that I send out. The first is my weekly email called Good News from the American West, which I send out every Wednesday. It's only positive news, something we can all use a little more of these days. And my other email is my bi-monthly book recommendations email. One email every other month with 5, 6, 7, or 8 books that I've recently read and highly recommend. The thousands of people on both of these lists will vouch for me. No spam or other funny business. And number 5, finally, check out my online store for Mountain and Prairie stickers, shirts, and coffee mugs. I've got some really cool designs from Western artists with more on the way. So head to mountainandprairie.com/shop to check it all out. I'd love to connect with you. I'm on Instagram and LinkedIn, so look me up on either of those platforms by my name or through the links on my website. All right, that's it. Thanks so much for your support.